Hi, this is a PowerPoint video about economic principle number 6. Free trade generally makes people better off because it lets them specialize at what they do best. First of all, let's define terms. By trade, we mean buying and selling a product or service. Free trade does not mean that you're getting stuff for free. Free trade is when people can trade, that is, they can buy and sell without barriers or obstacles, such as tariffs. A tariff is a tax on an import. An import is a product from another country. When the government puts a tariff on an import, the price goes up, demand goes down, and it interferes with trade. Quotas are another kind of trade barrier. A quota is a number limit on how much can be bought and or sold. For example, if you said to a Japanese car company, you can only sell 100 cars in the United States next year, that's a quota. It interferes with trade. Subsidies are when the government pays people, for example, farmers, to do something that is expensive or unprofitable, and again, that interferes with trade. Licenses, that's when the government gives you permission to buy or sell something. For example, only that guy has the license to import alcohol. That interferes with trade because people can't freely buy and sell alcohol. Anti dumping laws. Those are laws that prevent dumping. Dumping is when you sell a product at a loss in another country. So these are trade barriers. And when you do not have these, then people can buy and sell freely. And that makes people better off. By better off, we means they're richer and they're more efficient. They're more productive. That is, they can make more product, more t-shirts, whatever, in the same amount of time. And it allows them to specialize when you focus on one activity. So you're going to see here that free trade generally makes people better off. For example, let's look at these three graphs. And here you see world trade. Since 1950 here, has world trade increased or decreased? And here is world GDP. GDP is a very important statistic. It stands for gross domestic product. It's all the products that were made domestically in a country in a year. All the tomatoes, all the t-shirts, all the tables, all the movies, all the cars, everything. Everything that got sold in that country in 1 year. And so it kind of serves like the country's income. So here, as world trade went up, what happened to the world's income? Here you can see it starting in 1960. I know it's a little small. You see the trade has gone up here in green. And so what has happened to world GDP? In other words, what has happened to world income? Here you see it starting in 1980. Trade in red, did it go up or down? And what happened to world income? So clearly, world trade has increased. And the question is why? And it's gone up for several reasons. The first reason is peace. From 1989 to 1991, the Cold War, that conflict between the capitalist West, that is the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Japan, and the communist East, that's the Soviet Union and Eastern European countries like Poland, it ended in 1991 when the Soviet Union died. So here you see pictures of the Berlin Wall coming down 1989 in Germany. Here's a headline from December 1991 declaring the death of the Soviet Union, and it broke up into Russia and some other countries. So it was the end of the Cold War, more peace, more trade with Russia and those formerly communist countries. Trade went up. Also, here you can see deaths from war. So here, World War II ends in 1945, okay? And then what has been the general trend? The number of deaths in wars has gone up or down over time. Now, how does that impact trade? Well, if bullets are not flying around, is it easier or harder to trade? If there's peace, is it easier or harder to do business? Also, many countries have agreed over the years to lower their trade barriers. For example, here you see average tariff rates. They used to be as high as about 8.5%. And over the years, what has happened to the tariff rates? In other words, what has happened to taxes on imports? Have they gone up or have they gone down? Another thing that's helped free trade is container boxes. They are also known as 20-foot equivalent units, also known as TEUs, 20-foot equivalent unit, TEU. And what have they done to shipping costs? Well, it's super practical. You take the box and you fill it with all kinds of electronics and clothes and toys and food. 90% of our stuff gets to us through a TEU. And you can put it on a truck, you can put it on a train, you can put it on a boat. Before, loading the stuff by hand cost about $5.86 a ton. But using these containers, it costs only 16 cents a ton to load a ship. That is a 36-fold savings. So shipping costs have gone down by 36 times. Here you see an example there. Now, what has happened to computer prices? If you look here, you have the price of disk drives, that is the data storage. What's happened to the cost of data storage over the decades from 1960 to 2020? What's happened to the cost of data storage? And in light blue here, you see the cost of transistors or microchips. So what's happened here to the cost of computers? Has it gone up or down? And what has happened to the internet connection speeds, the time it takes to connect to the internet? Has that gotten slower or gotten faster? For example, uh, ocean freight transport has gone down by 70%. The cost of air transport has gone down 84%. The cost of a long distance international phone call from New York to London used to be $60 for 3 minutes. Now it's 40 cents. The price of a computer in 1960 was about $2 million, and in 2000, it's about $1,000. So, what has happened to the cost of shipping, air transport, ship transport, telephone calls, computing? What's happened to those costs? And have all those changes made it easier or harder to do international business? There is, of course, another big cost, and that is the cost of labor. If you were going to locate your garment factory, that is your clothing factory, which of these countries would you put it in? Well, let's consider the minimum monthly wage for these clothing workers. And this is all in US dollars, and this is all in 2007, so it accounts for inflation. The average monthly wage for a US clothing worker in a factory was about 1800 bucks. And here you can see China and India and Vietnam and Bangladesh. So, which country would you put your factory in? And why would you locate it in that factory? Many of the jobs that have been offshored, that means the job is moved to another country. A lot of those jobs have been textile jobs or clothing jobs. Why? It's what we call a low skill job. If you teach someone how to sew a t shirt on a sewing machine, they can do it, they can learn quickly, and also clothes travel well. It's easy to put them in a box and ship them. Here you see some hourly wages for textile workers. These are hourly wages. US worker costs 18 bucks an hour. Mexico, China, Bangladesh. So where would you locate your clothing factory? And why there? And here you can see a clothing worker in Bangladesh. When Bangladesh emerged as a new country in 1971, it was arguably the poorest country in the world or close to it. In 1974, there was some very bad flooding in Bangladesh. Here is Bangladesh. It's right next to India. It's located in South Asia. Bangladesh, India. Over the years, however, Bangladesh has gotten richer. Here you see the GDP, that is the gross or total domestic product, all of their production added up in dollars, basically the national income. And you can see here that Bangladesh is now a little bit richer than India, which is incredible because 50 years ago, Bangladesh was poor. How did Bangladesh become richer? Well, let's look and see where pay is lowest for cheap clothing production. What are the Bangladesh labor costs like? Here you can see in light blue what's happened to the amount of clothes that Bangladesh exports. Has it gone up or down over the decades? And if you look at this dark blue line, it shows you the share of total exports. It's about 80%. In other words, 80% of what Bangladesh sells abroad is clothes. So, how did Bangladesh get richer? How did Bangladesh get richer? Now, Bangladesh and places like that gain jobs. Who loses jobs? Here you see a clothing factory in Cleveland, Ohio, and it closed. Why? And I'll give you a hint. Look at the hourly textile wages. Again, these types of people gain jobs. This is a textile factory in Myanmar, which is in Asia. And why did they gain jobs? It's not just textiles, it's not just clothing. Let's take a look at cars and look at these hourly labor costs for car workers. Look at these countries, look at the labor costs by hour. Where would you locate your car factory? And why there? Companies hiring where labor costs are lowest is known as the race to the bottom. So the car companies, Toyota, Ford, GM, Mercedes, they are racing here to find the country with the lowest what? What does it mean, race to the bottom? And you can see here that a lot of car companies put their factories in Mexico. Toyota, Ford, Fiat, an Italian company, Volkswagen, a German company, Nissan, Japanese, Honda, Japanese. Why do they locate their car factories in Mexico? Here's another example. Here are some hourly manufacturing wages across several industries, not just cars, not just clothing, but lots of different factories. Here you can see German hourly manufacturing wages, US, Mexico, and China. Where would you locate your factory? Would you locate your factory in Germany, the US, or China? Now, what's the result of all that? What changes do you see here? What is the point of these graphs? Well, here you see who is making stuff. This is manufacturing output, percent of the global total. So, who is making the world's stuff? And you can see here there's a big change here from 1990 to 2013. What's the change here with regard to China? And why did that happen? And what's the change with Europe? And why did that happen? Here it is another way. You can see what has happened to China's share of merchandise export. So, this is how much stuff they sell to other countries. Dark blue is China. And the US and Germany have gone where? China's gone where and why? And I'll give you a hint. It goes back to this graph. Okay, the previous slides had to do with free trade's costs of doing business, shipping costs, computer costs, telephone costs, and especially labor costs. What about free trade's benefits? What are the benefits from free trade? Well, this shows you tradable goods, which can be bought and sold across country, and non-tradable goods, which can't be bought and sold across countries. What has happened to the percent of our income that we spend on tradable goods? So let's go look at food. Back in 1900s, we spent over 40%, almost half our income on food. And then what happened to how much of our income do we have to spend on food? And we can now, right, get food from other countries, like pineapples and bananas from Latin America. Let's look at apparel. Back in 1900, we spent almost 15% of our money on clothing. Now, are we spending more or less of our money on clothing? What has happened to the amount of money we have to spend on clothing, and why? Why did food and clothing costs go down? And I'll give you a hint. Look at housing. Housing prices have gone where? Healthcare prices have gone where? Now, we cannot get a house, and bring it from Mexico. We can't get a house and bring it from Asia. We can get food from overseas, we can get clothing from overseas, but we cannot get housing, we cannot get healthcare from overseas. What's the point here? What's the benefit of free trade? Here it is put another way. Back in 1900, we spent about 43% of our money on food, almost half. Then in 1950, only 30%, about a third of our money on food. 2003, 13%, one out of every $7, $8 on food. And if you look here, now it's down to 12%. So our food has gotten cheaper. Why? Let's look at clothing. Clothing, we used to spend 14% of our money on clothes, then 12%, now 4%, down to right here, 3%. So, how come we can now get a lot of our clothing and food cheaper? And I'll give you a hint. Think about where a lot of our clothing is made. What about other countries? Does free trade make them better off? Let's look at a couple examples. In the 1970s, China's leader was Deng Xiaoping, and he said, "To be rich is glorious." Not the kind of thing you'd expect from a communist leader, but he took China in another direction, and he encouraged China to trade with other countries. Did China trade more? Let's look at this solid blue line. Did trade go up? And then what happened to Chinese poverty? The dotted line is Chinese poverty. So as trade went up, what happened to Chinese poverty? Again, since the 1970s, China has gotten richer. It has experienced the largest reduction of poverty in world history as people left poor villages like this and they went to work in cities, in factories. So, what happened to the number of Chinese rural poor? Here it is in numbers. And here's the poverty rate, the percent. What has happened to Chinese poverty? Today, a lot of those Chinese are making these products and these appliances, these toys, and they sell them to other countries in exchange for money. They get richer, we get cheaper products. Has trade made China better off? People have left these poor Chinese villages and they've created these cities like Shanghai. Okay, has trade helped China? India is a similar story. India is now a leading exporter of clothes, rice, oil products, medicine like pharmaceutical drugs, cars, and software. And you can see here India's trade in red. Has it gone up or down? And their poverty rate, has it gone up or down? Here you can see India moving up. It's one of the world's largest economies. From sixth place, it's going to go up to third place, we predict. Has trade helped India to get richer? And has trade helped poverty go down? Let's look at the opposite case. Let's look at North Korea. For centuries, North Korea was ruled by outsiders like China and Japan. So North Korea now tries to do everything on its own. It believes in self-reliance. They call that juche. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. Sorry about that. So North Korea tries to make everything themselves. They don't trade much with other countries. Here's the dictator Kim Jong-un. How is this going for North Korea? Many North Koreans barely have enough to eat. On the other hand, right next door, you have South Korea. They make a lot of products and they trade them with other countries. For example, Hyundai and Kia are very successful South Korean car companies. Samsung phones are it's an excellent product. They sell it to other countries and make money. So here we have North Korea on the left. They don't trade. How are they doing? Here we have South Korea on the right. How are they doing? This is the capital of South Korea, Seoul, at night. And here you can see a satellite photo of the Korean peninsula at night. So here is North Korea. They're very poor. They don't have a lot of electricity. They don't have a lot of industry. They don't have a lot of cities. And here you can see South Korea, as you see here, it's a thriving capitalist economy. North Korea is communist and not trading. South Korea is trading and it's thriving. Free trade generally makes people better off. Another example, Cuba here. This is Havana, Cuba. Because Cuba's communist, a lot of countries won't trade with it. And what do you notice here? These are old-fashioned cars from the 1950s and 60s. Just 90 miles away from Cuba is Miami. And Miami's got its issues, but it's a prosperous city because it trades a lot. Here it is another way. I know this is a little out of focus. I'm sorry. But if you look at the poor countries that traded, we call them globalizers. And this is their growth rate. So the blue countries are trading a lot to other countries. They're buying and selling. And what's happened to their growth? The non-globalizers like North Korea, Cuba, they don't trade that much. What's happened to their growth? Here it is another way. This shows you the growth of GDP, that is the growth of their national income and trade. So here you see on the x-axis, the growth in their national income growing at 4% or 5%. And up here on the y-axis, it's how much trading do they do. Here again, you see South Korea. They do a lot of trading, Samsung, Kia, Hyundai, and so they have grown very fast. Not huge, but they've grown very fast. China's a huge economy, and they've grown fast because they trade a lot. Same with India. Let's look at the opposite case. There are a couple countries in the world that are landlocked, places like Mongolia, Kazakhstan in Central Asia, Ethiopia, Mali here, Chad in Central Africa. They are landlocked. They don't have a natural water route to trade with the world. It's hard for them to trade. And so these are some of the poorest countries in the world. So let's answer here. What are the benefits that come from free trade? What do rich nations get out of free trade? The price of many products goes up or down. The labor cost for many companies like Nike or Apple goes up or down when they can hire labor in another country. What do the poor nations get out of free trade? The number of jobs there goes up or down in Bangladesh or China. The increased competition kills their weak companies, but it helps their surviving companies expand and grow because they can sell to America or France or Spain, whatever. Surviving companies can sell, they can export to more customers. Poor nations also can get skills, technology, and money from rich nation, and each nation can do what it's best at. For example, India is good at growing rice. They can grow rice and they can sell it to the rest of the world. Whereas in Boston, it's too cold to grow rice. We should be exporting, lobsters from Maine and cod from Cape Cod and importing rice from India. There are costs of free trade. For example, that clothing factory in Cleveland, some people are going to lose their jobs. Why? And all of that transportation, bringing rice from India or selling Apple iPhones all over the world or bringing bananas from Central America, all that transportation means that pollution increases or decreases. And that, of course, causes global warming. Also, do all of those factory jobs have great working conditions? A lot of those factory jobs have got low pay and long hours, and it's not terrific. We're going to discuss more the pros and cons of globalization in our globalization unit. So, is free trade perfect? Does everyone benefit? No, it's not perfect. Everyone doesn't benefit, but EP6, free trade, generally makes people better off. You might say that we shouldn't buy foreign products, we should just buy products made in America, but today it's more complicated than that. What do you mean by an American product? Are these really American products? This is a LL Bean piece of clothing. LL Bean has their headquarters in Maine, but this was made in China. So is it really an American product? Here's a Nike shoe. Nike's headquarters is in Oregon on the West Coast in America, but here you see it's made in China. Is an Apple iPhone an American product? Apple's an American company headquartered in California, but the battery is made in China. This accelerometer chip is made in Germany. The gyroscope is made in Switzerland. Japan makes part of it. So a lot of these products are global, they're not strictly American. Last example, last slide. Where are cars made? I know it's a little hard to see, but you can see the electronics. Some is made in Germany and America and Japan. If you look at the glass, some is made in Germany and America and Japan and France. If you look here, some of the seat belts are made in Sweden here. If you look down here to the brakes, some of the brakes are made in South Korea. If you look over here, some of the engine is made in Japan. So a lot of these products these days are made all over the world. And our cars are better because we can get parts from all over the world. Our phones are better because we can get parts from all over the world. EP6, free trade, generally makes people better off. I hope this was clear. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.